with those best practices, what we want to do is to get the surveys into the knowledge base. So how do we do that? How do we define that? How do we define that survey effectively? So there's two things. There's sort of the survey level explanation, the information about the survey itself at a high level, not the data within it, but what it is. So in that you want to capture information around the description and purpose of it, who's submitting, who is it submitted to, the schedule, due date, frequency, the submission method, format, and layout details. That's not particularly the field. I mean, that applies to fields, but it's it's just coming in a file, and is it what's the format of that file? The time context for summary data. So if you're asking people to say, what's the total number of X, Y, and Z, that they, is it based on like at this very moment or at the end of last year or whatever. The population and selection criteria. If it's raw unit data, people are giving you raw data. What's the selection criteria for selecting that population, and how do you, the filters on that. And then we get into the sort of privacy and use and policy piece of it. So how will this information be used, right? So the sort of what the planned use for it is, as well as how else can it be used? So that means like where is this information stored? Can it be shared with others? Can it be used for other things? Is it destroyed, et cetera? What's happening to it? Like, is it only the results kept, or is this other data preserved? So those are sort of things that you want to capture in your knowledge base, somewhere around the survey at a high level. Right, so the next thing is then you want sort of a list of the data elements on that survey, right? So in that you need to have sort of the name or label of that data element. Is it, last name, or, interest in a dining hall, right? 1 to 5, right? And then the question text. So this is something that's sort of not currently in sort of a cookbook report spec, right? So the question text is what's the actual question that's being asked to get the response, right? And as many of you know, that the way you ask the question, the very specifics of the question can greatly skew the results. The next is the definition of the data element, right? So this is something that we're tracking. So what we mean by this is like, what's the difference between the question text and the definition? Like, the question is what's prompting and the answer. The definition is sort of, what is this thing that we've collected now, right? It is sort of driven by they're related in the sense that you want the question to give a response that is, that matches the definition of the data you're collecting. And then you have the quality attributes for each field. So as you're collecting information, you want to decide, like, what's a valid response? What can we collect? And so that's like, is this required? What's the format of it? Is there a range? Or the valid values? Other things like that. Then you also can have complex rules. So things like, this field is required if another field is yes, or something like that. That's a fairly common thing. So those are sort of rules that you want to set up for the data elements and the piece of and the information you want to track on them. And I'm sure there's lots of other things that you can think about that you might want to capture on this data, but that's the primary things for defining the survey. So all this information at the high level for what it is, and at the field level. So the goal is to track this in your knowledge base, or to have this documented somewhere, as opposed to just having a copy of the survey. So this is what this object kind of looks like in our diagram. So you have the survey details, the survey explanation information, and then the survey data, and that includes a data element list. And for each one of those, you have this sort of field level information about those attributes.